it is my great privilege and honor to be here with you, to spend this time with you, and I guess some of you will be sticking around for a while longer, a few days. I have I often, in fact, pretty much every single meeting that I attend, in the time leading up to the time for the meeting, I am determined to prepare something, to have some idea of what it is that I'm going to say, and some, logical progression from one point to the other and so forth. And so far in 11 or 12 years, I have failed to do that even once. And this is no exception. I'm not proud of it. I've heard that some are proud of these things. I'm not proud of it, but oh well, here we are. This is our 12th 5-day retreat. 12. It's astonishing to me. About 15 years ago, give or take, 95, 96, something like that. It all blends together. About 15 years ago, at a time when I had managed to spend quite a few years in the spiritual search as a spiritual aspirant. Quite a few years, I had done a lot of things in my life intending to settle and be rid of and solve the problem of human misery. I've been doing that for a very, very long time, since I was a child when I ran away from home and started writing bad checks at the age of 15. I was trying to find some solution to the problem of being a human being in this life, in this time, in this situation. Trying to solve the sense that my life was an enemy almost, certainly treacherous, certainly not to be trusted, and certainly out to get me. Not very satisfying, not very interesting, just dangerous and separate from me. Something to keep an eye on, something to watch out for. And over all those years, I went through a lot of changes, a lot of evolutionary permutations. I went from being a failed 15-year-old check writer to being a failed soldier, to being a failed machinist, to being a failed card sharp poker player, to being a communist revolutionary. I thought I had it then. I thought I finally had it, that I was finally on the right track. And I threw myself into it wholeheartedly for about, I guess maybe 2.5 hours, but that was enough to embark, to launch me on a path, on a road that I could not get off of from then on in. Launched me on a road that led to bombings and bank robberies and gunfights and escapes and time on the 10 most wanted list and a whole resume of stupidity. And finally to 18.5 years in prison. Everything I was doing, and I suspect this is the case for all of us, everything I was doing to try to solve the problem of being stuck in this human life, which seemed to promise so much and deliver so little. There came a time when I was in prison when I happened upon the ancient wisdom teachings from the East, in particular Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. And that was my introduction, my first introduction to these ancient wisdom teachings. And I took to them like I took to communism. This was it. I had it. Finally, I had found the right thing. And I embarked on 4 or 5 years of pretty fervent spiritual aspiration and spiritual seeking, the seeking after advanced spiritual understanding that would finally rid me of my confusion and ignorance that surely was the cause of the fact that I was so not at home in my own life, so alienated from my own life, so actually kind of hateful of my own life. After, as I say, 4 or 5 years of pretty, I had a lot of free time. And after 4 or 5 years of pretty intense practice, I got it. I was enlightened. I was enlightened, really. I'm not joking, I'm serious about this. I was enlightened. I lost all sense of person, lost all sense of any subjective point of person and meanness. Of course, something remained the subject of the whole array of experience and sensation and movement and so forth that constituted the life, but not a person. Awareness, perhaps. Consciousness, perhaps. Self, perhaps. But everything was open and clear. Everything. The stones sang to me. Dead birds taught me. I was home, free, liberated, awake, alive, enlightened, rid of the petty and paltry attachment to individual existence or individual consciousness or, God help us, self-consciousness. And then after about a year and a half of that collapsed utterly, completely. Just collapsed in a pile of rubble, leaving me in the worst situation and the worst circumstance that I had ever been in my entire life. It was very obvious to me that I had actually found the right path. I had actually embarked upon the right path. I had actually been fortunate enough to strike gold, and then, God knows why, the rug was pulled out from under me. And I was so wondrous in my suffering, in my yearning to get it back. So, really, gorgeous a person, this suffering personality, this desire to get back to no personality, to no thought, to no anything. I finally determined, I came to the conclusion that everything was crap. Everything. That there was not a single thought, not a single thing that we could possibly do as human beings that was not utter and abject crap. Useless. Pointless. But there was all this insistence from the outside, from books and people that I spoke to and past understandings and so forth. There was this insistence that where there was so much smoke, where there was so much activity bent toward trying to liberate oneself from the trap of human life, that there must be something going on there somewhere, for God's sake. And I set out to determine once and for all, to my own satisfaction, whether there was. I really didn't expect that there was, but I wanted to be done with it. I really wanted to be finished with it. I wanted to just, do the best I could for the rest of my life. Maybe I'd get out of the joint, maybe I wouldn't get out of the joint, but I'd do the best I could, get high when I could, get over when I could, so forth and so on. But first I had to clearly see directly for myself that there was nothing to be had in any of that. Because it still nagged me. I mean, I really was, enlightened. And what happened? So I set out to just solve that one question. Is there any possibility that anything a human being can do actually can bring an end to the sense of being a stranger in their own life, the sense of being afflicted by their own life, by their own circumstances, by their own thoughts, for God's sake, their own desires, their own aversions. And I settled on trying to determine, I had some familiarity with this Indian sage Ramana Maharshi. I had some familiarity with his life and his story and his teachings and so forth. And I had come to the conclusion that Ramana Maharshi was fundamentally different from many of the other spiritual people that I had read. That there was something about him that I couldn't make sense of. I really couldn't make it fit into any of my spiritual understanding, nor could I make it fit into any of my non-spiritual understanding. So I set out to try to find what it was that Ramana Maharshi actually was suggesting that we do with he was so certain that if we would do this, everything would be all right. In fact, that was the way he ended many of his conversations with people. Don't worry, it'll all turn out right in the end. Which of course is infuriating. So I set out to try to figure out what it was that he actually was suggesting we do, because I didn't think hadn't seen it anywhere. Who am I? What in the world is that? I knew who I was. I was infinite eternal consciousness, for the love of God. Now, I have to say, I have been in the 12 years that Carla and I have been doing this work, I have been somewhat, all that time, somewhat still a little bewildered about Ramana Maharshi. But I'll get to that later. In the course of trying to see what Ramana wanted us to do, and actually not as a result of successfully doing what Ramana wanted us to do, actually as a result of nothing that I can possibly put my finger on, I had an insight that was so startling that it actually pulled the rug out from under me, turned everything upside down. Just everything upside down. Now that insight was not big. It wasn't a big deal. And it wasn't very spiritual. And it wasn't any of the things that you might think. In fact, one of the things that made it so powerful to me is that there was so little to it. That it was so simple, so actually self-evident, and so simple that, wow, look at this. But I had no idea how to say anything about it. It's an insight. It's a moment of clarity that is obvious, self-evident, speaks for itself, and changes everything. But I've never been able to say anything really true and useful about that insight. I've tried. God knows I've tried. For 11 years, 12 years now, I have been trying to find a way to speak about what I saw that changed my life, that actually saved my life, actually turned everything around. Rid me of the alienation between me and my life. Rid me of the sense that my life was out to get me. Rid me of the desperate need to find some way out, some solution, some trick that would save me from the horror story that is my life. And for 12 years I've been trying to tell people what it was that happened. But I haven't had, in all that time, the vocabulary, the body of concept and thought and so forth that would serve me and allow me to do that. I could see, and I see now, and it's very clear to me, I could see how what I had seen, and actually had never not seen, and have never ever not seen, but that what I had seen actually was what was being talked about in the ancient wisdom teachings. I could really see how it was that those ancient wisdom teachings, with the talk of no thought, no mind, stopping, silence, lack of resistance, dispassion, all of those characteristics that we have all read and heard and talked about, the characteristics of the mind that is free from being a mind. I could see that what I saw was exactly what they were all talking about. I could also see that the way in which they spoke about it and the point of view from which they spoke about it was not right. Just wasn't the case. That the language that was used, the point of view, the whole thing actually was resting very comfortably and contentedly in the problem itself. Still trying the same old to save us from ourselves. What I mean by that is this. There's nothing whatsoever in the content of your life, nothing. No thought, no experience, no bad circumstance, no good circumstance, no desire, no aversion, no stupidity, no brilliance, no clarity, no ignorance. There's nothing whatsoever in your life that actually touches you in any way whatsoever. Nothing. Nothing that helps you or hurts you in any way whatsoever. There's nothing about your life that is your doing, in the sense that we normally mean your doing. Your life, as you experience it right in this moment, is the leading edge of a whole universe, a kind of a chaotic universe of movement, sensation, memory, thought, aspiration, desire, aversion, and clarity and ignorance, and la-di-da-di-da. But it's just a slice, just that one slice. It's effect. Everything that you call your life is an effect. Every single thing, every thought that is the content of your life is an effect. It causes nothing. It's an effect of the deep drive that's within us all from the very beginning of our lives to save ourselves from our lives. Your personality is an apparatus that has been cobbled together over all these years to protect you from your life, to give you some distance, a little bit of space from your life. An apparatus that contains what you have concluded to be useful to know about your life, what you've concluded is good and bad about your life, what you've concluded you can use to identify the incoming aspects of your life as good or bad or indifferent. This is an apparatus that is grown like topsy to protect you from your life. There's nothing wrong with your personality. There's nothing wrong with person. Nothing whatsoever. But it's your face. It's not you. It's your expression. It's not you. Not separate from you, but not you. We have spent thousands upon thousands of years devoted to one direction alone, and that is to find what I can do with the content of my life that will finally make it so it isn't hurtful to me, dangerous to me, and treacherous to me. How can I affect the content of my life so that it makes me feel good instead of bad? How can I make of myself someone who welcomes everything rather than pushes things away, some things away and clings to other things? For thousands upon thousands of years, this is the road that we have traveled, whether we've traveled it in spiritual circles, religious circles, political circles, philosophical circles, psychological circles. All has one outward-facing assumption, and that is there is something for me to do about my life that will solve this problem for me. Something for me to know, something for me to understand, something for me to become, some way for me to get rid of the life altogether, get rid of the thoughts altogether, get rid of the feeling of being me altogether. Something outward that I can do to save myself from the horror story of being born human. Something to do with the life. And truth be told, that's not working out real well for us for all the thousands of years we've been trying it. When we sit in meditation with the intent of creating silence and stillness in the mind, with the intent of creating a openness and a welcoming and a lack of resistance in the mind, we are wasting our time. We are trying to fix what is not broken. We are trying to fix what causes no trouble whatsoever. None. These are effects. They're not causes. And they hurt nothing. Now, it is clear to me, and has been clear to me for a long time, that there have been a number of human beings over the thousands of years that we've been out, heck, tens of thousands of years that we've been out at this. It's clear to me that there have been a few human beings, the Buddha among them, Shankara maybe, later day saints like Ramana and Nisargadatta and the like. It's clear to me that there have been a few human beings over the tens of thousands of years we've been doing this that have actually stumbled on sanity, have actually stumbled on the release from the idea that I have to do something to change my life. These are the ancient sages, and these are the sources of the wisdom teachings. The resolution of the problem of their being human is authentic. Clearly, they are done with it. Clearly, they are not affected or torn by the storms of human thought and aspiration and aversion, desire. But what I've come to be convinced of is that nobody has ever really known what happened to them. Nobody. Not me either. It's taken a long time for me to puzzle out what actually I see to be the case. And because of the fact that most of these folks who have stumbled on freedom, liberation, whatever you want to call it, because of the fact that most of these folks who have stumbled on this solution have stumbled upon it within a spiritual context, they had no way to speak about it except from the spiritual point of view. So that's how they tried to tell us. And the spiritual point of view tells us that in a life that is free from fear and misery and alienation from life, what we can expect is openness, lack of resistance, dispassion about passing circumstances and changing content. what we can expect is an awareness of the oneness of being. What we can expect is a diminishment in our desire to acquire and get rid of, to acquire what we want and get rid of what we don't want. And all of the teachings are about that. They are descriptions of what it feels like to be free. And all of the practices are, I say all, I may be painting too broad a brush, all the practices that I know of are devoted to creating within the mind that state of freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from self-hatred, freedom from all of that. And that's what we've been doing. We've been trying to make our minds right, to reform our minds, to change our minds, and thereby save our lives. We know it's our fault. We know it. We know it's because we're too stupid, or we haven't been taught right, or our parents were wrong, or the schools were wrong, or I was just bad. I was born bad. We know it's our fault. And God knows we want to be good. We want to do right. Everybody wants to do right. Everybody, every single person in the entire world is doing the best that they can. No exceptions. None. So and Ramana is among them. I don't think, and in fact it's Ramana's story that really has given me a lot of insight into how this unfolds. Ramana, you will recall, and Ramana isn't a saint to me. He's a fellow human being who went so far and had tried to help and was pretty much swallowed up by those around him who were determined to make of him a saint and a God figure. But Ramana, when he was 16, you got to really see this. He was 16. Do you remember what it felt like to be 16? Remember the hormones raging? Remember the stupidity, the absolute, like tunnel vision that 16 has? The isolation. He was 16. He wasn't a spiritual person. He was 16. His father died. Unexpectedly, suddenly, out of town. His father died. And sometime, and of course, God, imagine yourself, 15 or 16, and all of a sudden your father drops dead. That's human. That's a human thing. It's not a special, Bhagavan thing. It's a human thing. Some months later, Ramana, who had been occupied deeply with thoughts about death, as one would expect. We've kind of put a big shining glow on that, but he was preoccupied with thoughts about death, as one might expect from someone whose father had died early, like he was 40, I think, something like that, who had died early and unexpected and left you alone. And in the course of his obsession with thoughts about death, he finally decided that he was going to lay down and pretend to be dead. He didn't have a spiritual mission here. He really didn't. He just was scared of death and wanted to do something intelligent to deal with it. So he lay down on the floor, and he pretended to be dead. And he pretended that rigor mortis set in, and he pretended that the breath stopped, and he pretended that the body grew cold. This is pretense, right? Nothing of the kind was happening. And he pretended to be carried to the burning ghat and his body to be burned. And interestingly, his own report about what transpired in that little spiritual exercise was that when all else was gone, what remained was the force of personality. Not self, not nothingness, not nirvana, the force of personality. And then he took off. He stole a little money from his uncle and took off to go to Tiruvannamalai, where there was a well-known temple that he had heard of from somebody passing through. He went to Tiruvannamalai, and a friend of his a friend that he befriended there, began bringing him books from the library, spiritual books, the Upanishads and the Rima Gita and all of those things, spiritual books, which Ramana, according again to his own accounts, read because he was trying to understand what had happened to him. There you are. That's what we all have done. Something happens, we try to find out and understand what happens. We come upon a spiritual book which seems to resonate and call forth the same sense that experience had, and then we move into that realm of seeing that this is what happened to me, this is how it took place, this is what needs to be done. I wish I could help other people, and the way I can help other people is by teaching them, how to show that their thoughts are nothing, or how to show that their thoughts are false, or how to rid themselves of ignorance and all of that. So Ramana steeped himself in spiritual wisdom, which to his eye satisfactorily explained what had happened to him, but maybe not quite, because he really wasn't all that interested in that stuff later on. He came back always to one thing. For whom is this understanding? For whom is this problem? For whom is this glory? For whom is this ignorance? Always back to one thing. So I had this insight while trying to understand what Ramana wanted us to do. And everything changed. And I set out to try to find a way to speak to people about this. Because how could you not? I mean, people, this is such a great gift that we have here. This life. This human life. It is incomprehensible. And it is impossible. It is absolutely impossible to see that when we are scared of life. It's impossible to see that when we are still trying to fix our life and fix our personality so that we can deserve that. Can't see it while you're still trying to see it. So over these 11 years, I have been, and in the beginning I was much more, my vocabulary was much more still spiritual. I spoke of satsang, and I spoke of stopping, and I spoke of silence, and I spoke of all of that stuff. But I knew that that wasn't what I wanted to say, that really had nothing whatsoever to do with what had happened to me. I could see how it fit in. I could see why that would be believed to be the path, the way out of trouble. But I could see that it had nothing to do with what happened to me. Nothing. It was a description of the outcome, at best. Nothing to do with what happened to me. So over these years, I have tried my best, and I'm not the brightest bulb in the drawer or anything like that, but I've tried my best to come to some way to speak about what I have seen, to speak about this amazing possibility that has come upon me in a way that people can understand without having to refer to a whole body of understanding and philosophical insight that actually is beside the point. Because every time I say, I guess anytime I say self, for everybody in this room that has a spiritual basis, there is a certain sense that comes up as to what self means. If I say awareness, same. There's some sense that comes up about what awareness means in the context of Advaita Vedanta and non-dual teachings and ego death and things of that nature. So it gets pretty hard, right, to say anything whatsoever that is not already tainted with previous understanding, previous powerful understandings that hold us in their grip. But I think after all this time, I think I'm pretty close to being able to talk about this without referring to spiritual understandings. I think. I still can't tell you what to do. I still can't. I haven't found a way to get to tell you what to do in a way that's simple and straightforward and actionable. But I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to do this because it's also the first night of the retreat as well as a public meeting. I'm going to tell you what I think the deal is, the real deal. Let me see if I have any time left here. I think that Homo sapiens, this species of which we are a part, is, as we all can guess, is a evolutionary development in the life of this planet. It's a strange creature. We're a strange creature. We really are. It's hard to know exactly how in the world we managed to become kind of dominant on the planet when we don't even have fur or claws or sharp teeth or anything of that kind. But we have a brain, big brain. And we have something else that we have, that other creatures have to a certain extent, but nothing like we have it. We have awareness of ourself, self-consciousness. We are self-conscious in a way that is vivid and energetic and alive and discrete, like in no other creature. Above all else, I know that I am. In fact, it's the only thing I really do know, that I am. Our self-consciousness is, it might be a mistake, or it might be an evolutionary arising. But this self-consciousness, see, and this is what people talk about as ego. And what I'm speaking of is self-consciousness. It's what many people speak of as ego. It's the sense that I am something. I am something discrete. I am something with a center and a spherical universe that is part of my apprehension and understanding and so, or lack of understanding and so forth. And I am at the center of this cosmos. And it's me. It's not you, it's not the light, it's not all the stuff that's out there, it's me. This is self-consciousness. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to stop and say, let me see, am I something or not something? I am. Clearly. And what I think happens is this. See, I think that human misery is a curable disease. And I think it's a lot smarter to think of it as a curable disease than to think of it as some failing on our part to clearly understand or clearly see the nature of things as we should. I think that thinking of it as a curable disease is much closer to the truth, much closer to the reality of the problem that we have as human beings. And here's where I think the disease starts. I think there's a time in our lives, very early on, maybe at birth, maybe before birth, maybe a little after birth, when this sense of this sharp and vivid and energetic sense of I am appears. That's when we wake up from a long slumber, from a long, deep, dark sleep, thoughtless, experienceless, sensationless. And we wake up. Ah, it's me. But in the moment of that awakening, we are hit with such a bombardment of shock and awe that we can do nothing other than shrink from it. Ah, and light and motion and sounds and cold and hot and hunger and thirst and touching and not touching and bodies and not bodies and cold air and hot air, all sound, noise, all rushing in on us. Rushing in on us. And in that moment, we shrink. We say, oh. Now, what we're shrinking from is our lives. Is the content of our lives. We're shrinking from the sensations and experiences and thought forms and all of that constitute our lives. And we shrink from it. And that's where it starts. Right there. From that moment on, in my view, and this may or may not be literally true. I think it is literally true. But even if it's not, it's metaphorically the case. From that moment on, we are on the lookout. From that moment on, we are strangers in our own life. From that moment on, that moment of awakening to a wildness beyond comprehension. A need to find safety. A need to keep things at a distance until we can understand them. Until we can find a way to deal with them. And in the meantime, just to get by as best we can. Doing the best we can to get by. Trying to find a way out. Last thing in the world we want to do is end up in this life. The life, obviously, sucks. There's got to be something other than this. And everything we do from there on in serves that central sense of dissatisfaction and fearfulness of our own life. Now, this isn't a big thing. It's a big thing when it happens, but it's not a big thing as the life progresses, because it really isn't like some kind of a magnificent spiritual terror of the unknown or of emptiness or something like that. It's just a little mistake that cannot be avoided, and that happens in the moment of our awakening as a self-conscious creature. It's just a little mistake, a little inability to cope with the wildness that engulfs us in that moment. And over time, this alienation from life, this dissatisfaction in holding life at arm's length, just becomes the norm. And the energy that drives it, this little engine of fearfulness and dissatisfaction and discontent and ignorance, the engine that drives it is just a little little murmuring whisper underneath everything else. Watch out, what's that? What's that? What do I do about that? Uh-oh, wait a minute. Is he going to hurt me? What's that? What's that thought there? Like that. Sometimes if our thoughts really are spinning, we can get really spun up in them too. But the problem, the curable disease, is that low-grade fever of fearfulness and anxiety from which we relate to our life. It's not our fault. It's a mistake, but it's not our fault. It's a little mistake. It's not our fault. And we go on, we go from one thing from writing bad checks to being a machinist, to being a soldier, to being a crook, to being a communist revolutionary, to being an enlightened prisoner. We go on day to day to day, watching, trying to navigate the murky waters of the experiential nature of our life, wishing it would settle itself down, wishing somebody, for God's sake, would come and save me from this. Something. And for the most part, we'll settle on something that'll kind of keep us, able to maintain over time, and maybe we become disgruntled and dissatisfied and get old and cranky and die. Never having actually found that which we were looking for, something to fix this life, something to make this life right, some teaching, some God, some drug, some money, some fame, something to make this life right. Never finding. Except a few stumble on it. But what I've seen, and I see this because, and I know this because of my own experience, I have to tell you, the craziness of this personality, there's hardly a day passes that some new aspect of it doesn't seem to kind of fall off. Like it's a funny thing, personalities. They don't hurt anything. They're doing the best they can. But this is a curable disease. This sense that our problem is our life, that something has to be done about our life, that there's something off, something wrong, something missing, something too much. This is a curable disease. It's a low-grade fever. So what I suggest, and I know it works. I know it works because of me and Carla, and actually an amazing number of people around the world that have reported to me. Not everybody. Some people are in this, it takes them a while. It takes a while for this stuff to settle down and so forth. And some people write to me like one day and they'll say, well, this doesn't work. I don't know why I'm doing it. I think you're full of crap and I don't know what. And then maybe 6 months later, the same person will write back and say, you know what? You were right, man. Here's what you do. I can't tell you how to do it. And I'm going to spend the 5 days of this retreat trying to get as clear as I possibly can, close as I possibly can, to getting you to do what it is that I want you to do. I'm going to examine more deeply and in more detail some of the things that I talked about tonight. But this is what I want you to do. And I guess there are people here who are not in the retreat. This is the medicine. Don't think of it as a spiritual practice. I mean, you can, but that'll just get you confused. It's not a spiritual practice. If anything, it's a psychological practice. It's not a spiritual practice. Don't think of it as that. It'll just confuse you. Here's what you do. You see if there is not some way you can manage. You know what attention is, right? Attention? You know the beam of attention, right? Everybody's aware of the fact that we can focus our attention. It might be the only thing we can do. I'm not entirely sure that we can do that, but it sure feels like it, and there's sure nothing else we can do. We can focus our attention. What I mean by that is that, for example, I can seemingly by choice, I can focus my attention on those shoes right there in front of me. I can just look at those and focus my attention on those. And even if I close my eyes, I can, I can kind of direct my attention to remembering what those shoes look like. Or I can focus my attention on the feeling of my hand on my leg. Not on the grossest part of it, but on the, like what the skin feels like. And what the knee feels like through the jeans. What the feeling is, the sensation is. Not to name it, but to focus on it. We all can focus a beam of attention, and we all can move it from one thing to the other. In fact, it's that we do in most spiritual practices. We focus a beam of attention, and we place it on some, perhaps, for one example, place it on some experience that has previously been thought to be troublesome, and see that it disappears. But the first step in that is concentrating the attention into a beam and moving it onto that target, that sensation, that emotion, whatever. We all can do that. What I want you to do is to see if you cannot bring that beam of attention in direct contact with what it actually feels like to be you. Now, just for a second, a tenth of a second. Now, this is not for the purpose of understanding what it feels like to be you. It's not for the purpose of knowing what it feels like to be you. It's not for the purpose of finding a place where you can rest and abide in comfort and security with fearlessness and good feelings. Nothing wrong with places like that, but that's not what this is. It's what it feels like to be you. It's what Nisargadatta called the feeling of I am. What it feels like to be you. I just throw that in to demonstrate the fact that how easy it is to slip from the actual personal, individual requirement for you to do something into a spiritual realm, which, by the way, Nisargadatta did not occupy. I want you to see if it's not possible for just a tenth of a second to touch what it feels like to be you. Now, this is medicine. This isn't a get high. This isn't dope. It's medicine. It's not going to give you a spiritual experience. It's not going to open, the sky is not going to open, the light's not going to shine through, everything is not going to be clarified. Nothing will be clarified, in fact. And sometimes it even gets muddier. But it's medicine. It's all it is. And it's damned hard to do, it seems. It is so far impossible for me to suggest how you can do it. But that you can do it is sure. Because what I'm talking about is you. I'm not talking about some new thing. I'm not talking about some new state that you can somehow conjure up. I'm talking about you. You that is always here. Never absent, never missing, never. You. And here's what happens, I think. This is what I think happens. That beam of attention is part of the apparatus that is evolved to protect you from your life. It is probably the most energetic part of that apparatus, the most energetic tool that you have in the whole apparatus of persona to protect you from the vicissitudes and the dangers of life, that beam of attention. It's your weapon, it's your tool, it's your sentry, it's your outpost. Its whole purpose is to protect you from the life, to protect you from the life. You, this you, that I am asking you to bring the beam of attention in contact with. There's nothing about you that's very interesting. Nothing. In fact, there's nothing notable about you at all. The most notable thing about you is that you're never absent. You're always here. Always. Never missing. Ever. You don't notice yourself because the job of your whole persona and your whole capacity to attend to things is in order to protect you from things that move and have color and noise and sound and pain or pleasure or whatever kind of sensation they seem to bring along with them. You, on the other hand, don't do anything. Nothing. You're just there. You don't move. You have no color. You have no sound. You don't do anything. You have no sharp edges, no soft edges either. It's just you. So the beam of attention that has evolved in order to be able to look out for danger and promise has no interest in you. None. You're not an interesting object. You're boring. But if you do that once, and if you are willing to ignore for just a 30-second period anything that might come up to your mind about effort and effortlessness and things of that nature, and just do it like you would do the dishes or take your medicine. If you'll do it, if you will just try, you cannot fail. Even if you don't notice that you've succeeded, you cannot fail. And the immediate way of telling that you've succeeded is that you will do it again. You might not like doing it again, but you'll do it again. You might not believe in it. You might think it's a really stupid thing to do, but you'll do it again. The moment will come when you just find yourself trying to get a feel of yourself, a little touch of yourself. And then you say, oh, that's stupid, that doesn't do anything, and I'm never going to do that again, until you do it again. Now you can see how this aspect of this particular medical intervention is somewhat similar to some of the highfalutin things that are said about self and how it seeks you out, it's in love with you, and if you move toward it, it'll move toward you, and all of that stuff. You can see, can you not, the resonance with that whole spiritual sense of things. And that's what I'm talking about when I say that the time comes when you'll see that what has become of you has been spoken of previously, but you took it the wrong way. You took it as a prescription for something to do and become, rather than a description of what it is like to be a natural, sane human being, safe and secure in your own life. And that's the end of it. That's what happens in the end. Some people, in fact, when they approach the end of this process, this recovery, I call it a recovery. And sometimes I have to tell you, let me back up as I always do. The recovery can be hard. The recovery from any disease can be difficult. It can involve like fever and vomiting and aches and pains and all kinds of things as the body recovers from the effects of the disease. It's the same with this. When you begin taking this medicine, you're pulling, I've used this metaphor 3 times, I think I'm going to throw it away after this. You're pulling the rug out from under the whole apparatus that has grown up trying to serve you by protecting you from your life. So it's not surprising that it's often the case that things get a little wacky. And sometimes it doesn't feel good. It's not like a payoff that you expect from spiritual practice. Sometimes it feels really crappy until it doesn't. So, I've talked for a very long time about something that is really, really simple, which is the effect of looking at you. Just looking at you. Not seeing you. Not to see you. Not to see anything. Not knowing you. Not understanding you. Not anything of that kind, but just looking at you once in a while when it occurs to you to do so. Now the beauty of this is, right, that this doesn't require that you take a stand about anything else you're doing. It doesn't require that you give up your spiritual practices or your religious beliefs or your gambling or smoking dope or any of the things that you're doing. It doesn't require that you keep them either. It doesn't require that you understand what's happening. And it doesn't require that you dispense with your understandings. Nothing's required of the life. The life is an effect. Your understandings are effects. Your desires are effects. And the life changes. The fever breaks. And sometimes when the fever breaks, I had a really amazing couple of letters last week from a man who has been with us for some time now. In fact, we put them on the website. The first one was called The Flat Effect. That was the subject of the email, the flat effect, in which this man, related to me how after all this time, now everything just seems dull, uninteresting, boring. And finally, and this man had struggled a lot over several years on this road. And now he reported to me that everything was flat, that life held no interest, held nothing to cause attention or care about, and he wondered whether that was going to be the way it was going to be forever, flat, uninteresting, boring, kind of depressing. And then maybe 2 weeks later, he wrote back to me, and see that what he wrote from the time when the fever was breaking, when all the drama was draining out, all the heartache, all the yearning, all the human nonsense that we enact in order to try to entertain ourselves. And then he wrote me a couple of weeks later, absolutely nothing dramatic, but just in a state of wonder at how unbelievably beautiful life as a human being is. Nothing changed about it. You know, it's not like all of a sudden everything shines and sparkles. Everything is as it always was. Things that are dull, things that are bright and shiny are bright and shiny, things that are painful, things that are pleasurable are pleasurable. But oh, what a difference when that's not all held at arm's length in order to make sure that I am not tricked or trapped. Ah, what a difference. And then you see what the sages mean when they talk about such things, such crazy things as traveling to the far shore, discovering that it is the shore that you departed from. When they talk about chopping wood and cutting water and chopping wood and cutting water. chopping wood and carrying water. It won't make you a brainiac. Duh. It won't make everything sparkle. But I tell you from my heart, from my own experience, that this life is, it's unbelievable to be human and alive. It's unbelievable. We are, at least in this corner of the universe, we are the luckiest and most filled recipients of the actual possibility of consciousness, self-consciousness. And this is not something that's reserved for the special few. It's not something that's reserved for the meritorious or the saintly. It's not something that's reserved for those who understand rather than those who fail to understand. This is you. It's you. It matters not anything that has transpired in your life. It matters not. It cannot help you or hurt you. It cannot hinder you in curing yourself from this stupid disease. And all you have to do is try. Try. See if you can. I'd give you a couple of clues. One is that it is inward. You are inward. And you are not one of a number of things that are inward. You are all that is inward. Everything but you is outward. Everything. You are at the heart of the matter. You've never changed. You've never been absent. You're like you've never been not aware of yourself. You're like the white paper that carries the black print. The black print is what carries the story and the interesting stuff, the understandings, the story, the aspirations, the yearnings, the failures, the successes. The black print is the thing that we are most interested in, following that black print, following that story. But every second that we spend looking at the words in the black print, we are absolutely aware of the whiteness of the paper. Totally. How could we not be? We could not see the print without the white paper. But we don't notice it. You're like that. There's never a time that you're unaware of it, what it is to be you. Never. But you don't notice it, because you're not interesting. But I'd like to make you interesting to yourself by promising you that if you bring this medicine there, everything will turn out right in the end. Look at yourself. Just that. Find a way. Work with it. Try to understand it. Try to do it. Try to do whatever you can do to get that attention inward. Just to touch yourself one time. One time. That's all it takes. One time. And you don't even have to know that you did it. Okay, now here's the deal. There are people here who are on retreat, and there are people here who are not going to be on the retreat. The people who are going to be on the retreat can't ask questions tonight. No questions from the retreatants. But if there's anybody here who's not on retreat, who would like to ask me questions or speak to me or contend with me in any way whatsoever, I'll be happy to do so. Just no retreatants. I'll have you for 5 days. Yes.
Is that?
Could you come up here? It's really, We have finally, over this time, developed I hope, is it too hard for you?
Oh, yeah, I can stand, but I won't be able to sit in that chair.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Get another chair.
So,
There goes Helen.
There we go.
Helen got a chair.
There you go.
thank you.
Here's a chair.
Thank you.
Just face a little bit here so we can see you.
Okay. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to meet
Hi,
you.
nice to meet you.
Can you
My
hold
name's
this?
Ralph.
My name's John.
Hi, John.
It's my pleasure.
Nice to meet you. John, is this,
Yeah, it's fine.
you can hear that? John, the nature of the self, is that self, the deep self, is that one self in all of us? In all of us, you see what I mean? Is our deep self one self among all human beings?
Here's the thing, right? The actual nature of things
Yeah.
speaks for itself. Okay? Now listen to me. Follow
Okay.
this. Reality speaks for itself, and it's very clear. It is not easily molded into words and thoughts and concepts and so forth,
Yes.
but it speaks for itself. So I don't know any way to answer that question that's helpful.
I see.
The thing that has to happen is you have to see for yourself.
Oh, I see.
And you're here, right?
Yes,
No question about that.
yes.
Look and see what makes you so certain. Look there. Just try that. And I promise you that all of these matters having to do with the nature of self and and so forth and its place in the scheme of things, all these things will be rendered very clear to you. And you probably won't be able to speak about it any better than I can. But I tell you this, that trying to understand it within your mind
Yes.
will take you nowhere. I mean,
We'll do what?
take you nowhere.
Oh, yeah. I think I've been spending a lot
Yeah.
of time doing that.
But what will help is to look at you.
Okay.
That's practical.
Yes.
And then, I promise you, reality speaks for itself. And it just kind of takes your breath away. And I just don't have any, I don't know how to speak about it. I encourage you to see for yourself.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay,
Is
thank
that
you.
helpful?
Thank you.
You're very
Yeah.
welcome. Stay in touch with me if you can.
Okay. Thank you.
You see, that's the thing, right? When we try, and all of our efforts to try to apprehend deep truths like Ralph was talking about, when we make these efforts to apprehend deep truths, all we are doing is trying to find a way to save ourselves from our own ignorance by clearing it up. We have become convinced, mostly by misguided and well-intentioned teachings, ancient teachings. We've been persuaded that the solution to the problem of being human is to enlighten the mind, is to bring light to the mind so that all misunderstandings are cleared up and everything is clarified. But this is a wild ride we're on here. You know, the chances of it getting cleared up and clarified are really slender. I see very little hope for that. But I do see that free of that disease, free of that murmuring dissatisfaction and discontent, that murmuring sense that life is out to get me, I do see that you see everything very clearly. And to try to condense it into a set of understandings and a vocabulary and a set of tropes and so forth, to try to do that is just to dumb it down and really doesn't do us any good. our idea that understanding will save us is a misunderstanding. Really. Okay, anybody else? Okay then. It's been my great pleasure to be here. Some of you I will see over the next 5 days. Some of you maybe I'll see downtown, but I hope that anybody who has heard what I have to say, and it has sparked any kind of curiosity or a sense of, wait, that's, what is he talking about? I hope you'll get in touch with me. Email me, write to me, get in touch with me. Because I'd love to hear from you. And for the people who are going to be here for the next 5 days, I welcome you, and I am really happy to be here with you. And I tell you that these retreats never turn out as we thought they would. They are they are wild things of their own. They have their own rhythm and life, and we're just swept up by them, gratefully. And one of the reasons that I did not want to have questions from the people who are on retreat is because I'd like you guys just to kind of not ask so many questions so quickly. You know, just let it sink in. Okay? My great pleasure. I'm so grateful for all of you being here. Okay, bye.